There is an island where time doesn't work the way you think it should. Not metaphorically, literally. Clocks don't tick. The sun doesn't rise or set the way it should. Even satellite data has a hard time pinning it down. It's called Sommarøy, and it sits way up in northern Norway, inside the Arctic Circle, a place where time, in the conventional sense, has started to fall apart. Let's explain. Sommarøy, which means Summer Island, is home to a tiny population of a few hundred people. But what makes it truly fascinating isn't the population size or even its location. It's how the people there have chosen to experience time. For 69 days every year, the sun never sets. From mid-May to late July, Sommarøy exists in a state of perpetual daylight. That means 3 a.m. looks exactly like 3 p.m. There is no darkness. There is no night. And as a result, the concept of time itself begins to unravel. Your brain's natural circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells you when to sleep, eat, and wake up, gets thrown completely out of sync. And the locals? They just stopped caring. Kids play soccer at 2 in the morning. Families mow their lawns at midnight. Fishermen go out when the water is calm, not when the clock says it's time. Businesses open and close loosely, based on need, not schedules. In 2019, the residents of Sommarøy actually proposed becoming the world's first time-free zone. Their argument? If time isn't real here, why pretend it is? Of course, there were practical problems. Schools still needed start times. Ferries had to run on something resembling a schedule, but the message was clear. In Sommarøy, the tyranny of the clock doesn't apply. And the psychological effects are fascinating. When you're not bound by the artificial structure of 24 hours, you start to live differently. You nap when you're tired. You work when you're motivated. You don't count hours, you count light. But here's the thing. This isn't unique to Sommarøy. Parts of Alaska, northern Canada, and Russia all experience periods of midnight sun. But nowhere else has the population leaned so hard into rejecting time entirely. That's what makes this place so interesting. It's not just nature defying time, it's people choosing to. So why does this matter? Because time is something we treat as universal, unquestionable. But it's not. Time zones, man-made. The 9-to-5 workday, industrial revolution. Even the 7-day week has no astronomical basis. It's just a system we agreed on. And on Sommarøy, they're saying, what if we unagree? Now before you go packing your bags to live in an eternal summer, keep in mind, this isn't some utopia. The flip side of Sommarøy's bright summer, a long, dark winter. From November to January, the sun disappears completely. Total darkness. Depression rates rise, energy levels drop. And just like in the summer, time begins to blur again. Only this time, it's under a curtain of night. And that contrast? That's what really messes with you. Because time, it turns out, isn't just about clocks. It's about rhythm, light, social cues, biological cycles. And when you remove those, you don't just change your schedule, you change how you experience being human. Some scientists have even suggested that humans living in time-distorted places develop a different sense of self, a more intuitive awareness, less tethered to deadlines, more attuned to personal needs and natural signals. It raises a haunting question. If time is fake, how much of you is also constructed? So maybe the point isn't to abandon time entirely, but to remember that it isn't sacred. Because on an island where the sun doesn't set, and clocks are more suggestion than law, you start to wonder, were we meant to live this way all along? Or did we build a world too rigid for how nature actually works? Sommarøy doesn't have the answer, but it's asking the right questions, and that's what makes it one of the strangest and most quietly revolutionary places on Earth. But let's zoom out. This idea, that time is flexible, even artificial, isn't new. In fact, entire cultures used to organize their lives based not on hours, but on natural phenomena. The ancient Egyptians measured time by the stars. The Mayans built temples to track solstices. Aboriginal Australians navigated their terrain through something called songlines, oral maps where time, space, and story were inseparable. In other words, humans didn't always live by the clock. The idea that your value is tied to productivity? That came much later. And when you look at Summeroy through that lens, it becomes less of an anomaly and more of a return. A return to a world where time was fluid, where midnight could mean sunrise, where your schedule was shaped by tides, weather, and instinct. Imagine waking up not because an alarm screams at you, but because the sky begins to blush and you feel ready. Imagine eating when your stomach growls, not when a break room policy says it's okay. It sounds romantic, but it also raises a deeper point. How many of our problems come from living against nature? Sleep disorders, burnout, anxiety about being late to some invisible finish line. And then here's this island, quietly, stubbornly, saying, "What if you didn't live that way?" Now think about this. Even in places that do follow the clock, we already cheat it. Jet lag, daylight saving time. We've built entire coping systems just to accommodate how unnatural our concept of time really is. In fact, the whole idea of time discipline, punctuality, time cards, routines, didn't dominate until the Industrial Revolution. Before that, most people lived agrarian lives, ruled by the seasons. Time was communal. It flowed with the land. If it rained, you stayed in. If it was light out, you worked. Clocks were for churches and rich people. Fast forward to now, and your watch beeps at you to stand up. And here's a tangent worth sitting with. Did you know that even our perception of how fast time moves is affected by novelty? When you experience something new, your brain pays more attention. It lays down more memory tracks. That's why childhood feels so long in hindsight, and adulthood speeds by in a blur of sameness. So in a place like Summeroy, where nothing follows the expected rhythm, time might actually feel longer, not shorter. The lack of routine might force you to be more present, more conscious, because you can't rely on the clock to tell you what to do. You have to decide, and that's terrifying, but also liberating. And this leads us to something deeper. What if the reason we cling so tightly to time isn't because it helps us, but because it protects us from ourselves? Time gives structure, predictability. It lets us outsource responsibility for our choices. I have to go to work now. It's 9 a.m. Not, I want to work now. In Summeroy, that illusion is gone, and maybe that's the real fear, not the sunlight or the dark, but the loss of the excuse. Because once time becomes yours, so do the consequences. And look, maybe Summeroy is extreme. Maybe you need the clock to get your kids to school and your laundry done. But what would your life look like if you ignored time? Just a little? Turn off your phone. Don't look at the clock. Eat when you're hungry. Sleep when you're tired. Let your body, not your calendar, decide. You might miss a meeting, but you might also meet yourself. Summeroy isn't just an island without time. It's a mirror, one that shows us how deep the clock runs in our psyche, and how fragile that ticking really is. Do you own your time, or does it own you? If you want more places that warp your understanding of reality, make sure to subscribe, and drop a comment if you think you'd thrive or totally fall apart in a place where time disappears. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next descent into the weird.